The locust leaves started kicking off their flowers just over a week ago. So I'll show you what each system is doing at this point, both on the north and the south side of the garage. It is Sunday, June 7th, 2020. I am up on the north side of the garage. The locust leaves started kicking off their flowers just over a week ago, Friday, and we have gone through the initial drop-off in which they were kind of a yellowish green color. We went through a lot of rain towards the latter part of the week that I videotaped, and you saw that. And now we've had a string of multiple sunny days, so probably 3 or 4 sunny days in a row where everything has kind of browned up and dried up. So the interesting thing with the locust flowers, and one of the reasons why I think they are the peskiest, or one of the peskiest sorts of debris that comes off a tree, is because now that they've dried up, they are still sitting on top of the gutter guards. So nothing has kind of kicked them off at this point. So that basically means they still have some moisture content in them, and they're not quite at the point where they're ready to blow off. I do expect that these will eventually blow off, but at this time they haven't, and I think they'll probably sit up here for maybe another month or so before they actually drop off. So I'll show you what each system is doing at this point, both on the north and the south side of the garage, and you can kind of be the judge at this point in the test as to how each system is performing. This is MasterShield on the north side of the garage. You can see there's a little bit of debris here on the left side of the panel. And then you can see just kind of a smattering of stuff across the rest of the panel, including some pine needles that have fallen off the tree up above. But overall, the surface area, the screen surface area on this is remarkably clean. And nothing is really, a little bit of stuff, as you can see, is holding to it, but by and large, very little is holding to it. Also, I thought I'd take a look at the front of the gutter. So as you know, this one has a little bit of a built-in drip edge to it to help kick stuff away from the face of the gutter. So you can see overall it's doing a very good job keeping the debris off. Again, we've got mostly these little locust flowers and just some other small stuff that's sitting at the upper lip area of the gutter itself. But by and large, you can see the face of the gutter is clean, and then underneath also is very clean. So this is MasterShield as we stand here in the early part of June 2020. Sitting next to MasterShield is LeafFilter. So you can see LeafFilter at this point has a pretty good amount of debris sitting on top of it. It's a combination of leaves, the flowers off the locust tree, as well as pine needles that have come down off that pine above. And looks like there's even a twig and some other stuff. So I would say the majority of the screen in this case is covered up with the debris at this point. If we step down to the face of the gutter, it is also doing a good job. Like MasterShield, it does have this little plastic drip edge over the face of it. So that really does do a good job keeping most of the stuff off the face of the gutter. And you can see here there's very little stuff on it. And then if you go to the underside, it's also very clean at this point. So the big kind of question mark at this point is the fact that you have all this debris sitting on top of it, where because it does sit flatter inside the gutter, it is more like a shelf, and it's more likely that things will sit on top of it and are sitting on top of it. So if you just compare the two between MasterShield and the LeafFilter system, very little sitting on top of here, a little bit over to this left side, and then over here you can see the top of it is basically covered. There's the third system in line here is LeafSolution. Now this one's installed up under the shingles, and you can see how much debris is sitting on top of it. So we have more of the screen is exposed on this system than it was on LeafFilter. but you can see there's a fair bit of debris currently sitting on top of it, mostly comprised of the locust flowers and pine needles, and just kind of random stuff that falls off the pine trees, little buds at this point that come off the pine trees. Now if we come down to the face, you can see across the lip, this one does not have a drip edge on it. So you see more stuff sitting kind of at the upper lip as well as just around the corner. You can see the debris that's on the face. So the face of this one compared to LeafFilter and MasterShield is quite a bit dirtier. And then you come to the underside and you can even see a little bit of debris on the underside of it. But quite a bit more debris here at the face of the gutter guard, or the face of the gutter, because the gutter guard does not have a little bit of a kick out flashing on the front of it to help divert the stuff away from the face of the gutter. This is LeafLock. So this is a micro mesh that we offer. This is a little bit more porous micro mesh screen than the first three systems that I showed you. You can see it is installed up at an angle under the first course of shingles, so it does have a slope to it. And like LeafSolution, it does have a fair bit of debris sitting on top of it. You can see some of the screen is visible through here, but there is a good amount of debris sitting on top of this panel. You can also see a random feather, a few bit of leaves, and some of the pine needles that come off that pine tree up above. Now if we turn to the face of the gutter, here you can see more stuff along the face of the gutter. I would say this is pretty similar to the LeafSolution, because like LeafSolution, it doesn't have a drip edge on the front. It is recessed a little bit off the face of the gutter, or off the front edge of the gutter, and I do think that that might help with it, because the water actually dumps in, farther back. But obviously, whatever water is coming over the top, it's kind of dragging some of that debris with it. You can see that across the face of the gutter. And then on the underside, it looks pretty good. It's a little dirtier than both the LeafFilter system and the MasterShield system are. But overall, a moderate amount of debris on the front. The fifth system in line is the do-it-yourself GutterGlove product we've talked about. You can see it's got a lot of debris sitting on top. You can see a little bit of the screen through that debris, but the majority of it is covered at this point. And there's still some debris even up at the roof level that's just kind of waiting to transition onto or off of the gutter guard. This one is very similar to the LeafLock, which is next to it. The primary difference, one of the things that I've learned, especially since this last rain, is that the design on this doesn't have a downward flange on the inside lip of the gutter, and that allows more water to come across it. And so if you transition to the face of the gutter, you can just see how much more debris is on the face of the GutterGlove do-it-yourself product than it is even next door on the LeafLock. Now LeafLock has, a reasonable amount of debris on the face of it, but this system right here has even more across it. And I would say probably twice as much debris is on the face of the gutter. But then what's also interesting is when you come down to the bottom, you can kind of see that yellowing effect. So that debris just has brought that much more water across the face of it. And I don't know if you can see in the sunlight, but the face of the gutter is probably twice as dirty as the LeafLock system is. And then you can just see the water stains. That's essentially where the water has intersected or interacted with the flowers, and that flower has discolored the water, caused it to brown up. And you can see those dried water droplets at the base of the gutter. So this is the GutterGlove do-it-yourself product. The last system in this stretch on the north side of the garage is the clean mesh system. This one slides up under the first course of shingles. You can see it has a fair bit of debris. For quite a while, this was doing a pretty good job. Even when the locust flowers initially fell off onto the roof, started to fall off the tree, this one was reasonably clean, but you can see how it does have some screen that's available, so it actually is doing a better job than some of the other systems. There's a little bit more buildup at this side than there is at the far side. Now the far side is at the end run of the garage there, so it may be getting a little bit more wind or a little bit different directional wind coming that way. If we drop down to the face, you can just see how much stuff is kind of across. It almost looks like chicken pox across the front of the gutter. And then if we come down below, you know, it's pretty clean there. Not a whole lot of stuff at the base of it, but there is a fair bit of stuff here on the face of the gutter itself. So one of the things that I noted in the water when we had the rain several days ago is that this thing was really failing pretty tremendously. In fact, I might retire this one sooner than later from our test, because there are several other systems that I would like to test and compare to some of these other micro mesh systems. And this one was just allowing a tremendous amount of water to come over the between the screen and the weep holes that are supposed to be at the front here, supposed to be here, that are not really well visible. It was allowing a lot of that water to pool up at the end there and then stream over the face of it. But here you can see kind of post rainstorm that we had the other day, how much debris is still sitting on top of it, as well as the debris that's sitting on the face of it. I'm on the south side of the garage. You can see behind me a number of the gutter guard systems with the debris that has come off the locust tree. It is Sunday, June 7th, 2020. This is about 4 days after a good heavy rainstorm that we had that I was able to capture on video. So I just wanted to show you what the systems look like now that it's dried up after 3 or 4 days. So stay tuned and I'll show you what's happening here. This is MasterShield on the south side of the garage. Again, here on the inside edge of the product, on the right edge of the product, you can see more debris has built up. This debris was pretty well present when it was raining the other day. You can see a little bit more debris that's kind of pulled off the roof and landed on top of it and is sitting on the screen. But the vast majority of that screen is clear. So you just have kind of a hodgepodge of debris at this point that's sitting on various points, either on the screen or on the front, kind of the front lip of the gutter guard. So on the south side of the house, this is the one that has the least amount of stuff on it at this point. If we step down and we look at the face of the gutter, there's almost nothing on the face of the gutter. You see a couple pieces of the locust flower there, a little bit sitting up by the drip edge, and then you come to the underside of it, and basically there's nothing there. So this one, that drip edge really does an effective job in terms of pushing the leaves and debris away from the face of the gutter, and this is a good case in point how well that's doing. The next system in line is LeafFilter, so that's sitting immediately next to MasterShield on the south side of the garage. You can see just to what extent the flowers and the pine needles are sitting on top of this system. There's a few random leaves here as well. As I've noted before, this one sits relatively flat inside the gutter, so there's a pretty good gap there between the roof edge and where the gutter guard starts, and as a result you can kind of see how stuff builds up in the back of that. I would describe the debris on here as getting pretty thick. So whereas the MasterShield has just a kind of an initial layer of stuff sitting on top of it, this has several layers that have kind of compounded itself. And if I step down, maybe you can see what I'm talking about there, just how thick that sits up there. So this one has taken in or taken on a lot of debris on the top side of it. If you come down to the face, you can see down at this end in particular how even with the drip edge on it, more stuff has come over the top. and it's hit the face of the gutter. So you kind of stream across here. You can see all that. And if we step down even another notch and we look underneath the gutter, overall it's pretty clean. You can see some yellowing there, some water stains where it had been dripping at this end. So this end seems to have fared a little worse than the left side of it, in a similar way to the MasterShield, also to its right. But on the underside, the MasterShield was very clean, and this one you can see some of the water stains that have formed at the bottom. So that essentially means that the water has combined with the debris on top. It's come over the edge, and then it just kind of browned that water, and then that's where it was dripping off when it was raining. The next system in line, the third one in on the south side, is GutterGlove Pro. So what we see with GutterGlove Pro is you see some screen that's open, and you see a lot of debris sitting on top of it. But those flowers are even farther up onto the roof itself. So I would say about half of what you see here is on the roof, and half of what you see is on the gutter guard itself. GutterGlove Pro in this case is up underneath that first course of shingles, so it is sitting up at an angle, and you can see that in kind of comparison to LeafFilter, which is sitting next to it, pretty flat. This also has a very fine screen on it, so I do find it interesting that these systems with the finer screens, like this one in particular, and then the LeafFilter is kind of obvious as to why stuff's building up on top of it, because it does sit so flat in the gutter. But the GutterGlove Pro is at an angle, and yet it's holding that debris up here. Now there's a little bit of a lip, a little transition between the screen and the metal framework at the front. So I'm not really sure why it's sitting up here as much as it is. But if you come around the face of it, you can also see it drew quite a bit of the debris over the front. Right in front of me here, you can see the streak that's coming off. So again, that's where a line of water was. It just worked its way across the top, and it just continued over a period of time to the point where it discolored the face of the gutter. Here, if we drop down to the underside, you can really see where that water concentrated and created a series of beads along the base of the gutter. Also, interestingly, you can see some of that yellowing at the back of the gutter. So while I don't think water was necessarily coming down from behind it, I do think it was streaking over the edge, and then it was working its way backwards and then dripping off the back edge of that gutter. So the GutterGlove Pro, which is considered a premium product and actually was one of the winners of Consumer Reports survey back in 2010. This one was ranked #1 as a do-it-yourself product, which it is definitely not a do-it-yourself product. And LeafFilter was ranked #1 as a professionally installed product, and you can see how both of those systems are faring in this test. I'll let you be the judge of what you think or how it's performing at this point. So again, this is GutterGlove Pro, June 7th, 2020. Next to GutterGlove Pro is LeafLock. So LeafLock is also represented on the north side of the garage. You can see a whole lot of the flowers sitting on top of this system. Again, half of it is on the screen itself. You can see the screen openings as I pan across here, but the majority of it is currently covered up. And then the rest of the debris that you see is sitting up at the roof level. And there's thousands and thousands of these little flowers kind of between the roof and on the gutter guard surface itself. This one is pitched up underneath the shingles. And the screen on this one is a little bit more porous than it is with the GutterGlove, LeafFilter, and MasterShield. So you can actually see the openings in the screen, whereas you can't really see that with the other three products. If I come down to the face of the gutter, it's doing a pretty good job. You see a little bit of the flowers that come across the front here, but overall, very little. And then if I step down even more, if you look at the underside of it, you can see a little bit of yellowing where that's kind of brought the water down and some of that's dripped off the bottom. But again, it's very little overall. And one of the advantages of the LeafLock system is its design, its ability to prevent some of that water from wicking between the front lip of the product and the front lip of the gutter itself. So it does a pretty good job of retaining it despite having all that debris sitting up on top of it. The fifth system up here is the diamond pattern mesh screen. The mesh is similar in scope to, it's a little bit more rigid screen, so it's a little bit thicker wire, but very similar to the LeafLock system that sits next door. And you can see just how much debris is sitting on top of this one. Now, whereas you could see a little bit of the screen with LeafLock, you wouldn't have a clue what this product is other than seeing just the front metal piece that goes across the front of it here. You know, maybe there's a couple spots there in my shadow where you can see the screen, but this thing is covered up, no doubt about it. This is also a system that if I step down here, you can see just how much stuff is sitting on the face of it. And then if I go down one more step, you can see the underside. So you can even see here, maybe it's a little hard to see on the screen, but you can see some streaking, some of the darker where the water was, kind of right down the middle, and how that transitioned onto the downspout. So this was what I think I described the other day as an epic failure when it came to the water. There was a lot of water streaming over this system, and I would say this and the clean mesh system were very similar in how they performed. Clean mesh may have been one step below this, but this one did a very poor job of keeping in the water once it was covered up with debris during that rainstorm. So if you refer back to that video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The last system up here is LeaFree. It's the only solid gutter cover in this test. And the reason I have it up here is because I want to see how it performs compared to the MicroMesh systems. Overall, the other night when you saw the water coming off of it, most of the water, the vast majority of the water, was actually going inside the gutter cover. You can see this cover itself doesn't have much in the way of debris on it. It has a little bit over here on the left, but it's just kind of dotting the rest of the screen. So you would expect that because it's a solid cover, very little friction on it, so the stuff's going to come off the roof, and once it hits that wet surface, it's generally going to slide forward. The big problem, however, with this system is if we just kind of focus right in front of me here, and I don't know if I can back up even more, but you'll see that debris, how it got pulled around and actually drawn inside the face of the gutter guard. So at that curvature, you're seeing how it drew the water in, and with the water, it drew the debris inside of it. So while the opening is still available to take in the water, there is a fair bit of that debris, and I suspect even more, that has gotten pulled inside the gutter itself. And if we kind of transition down to the face of it, you know, there's a modest amount, or a moderate amount, of debris, mostly over here, and then a little bit down at that end. And then if you go to the underside, you can definitely see some yellowing across here. But overall, again, not too bad. There are a couple spots where it's more prevalent. You can see it. But overall, the face of the system isn't too bad. So my observation from the other night was most of the water was going in, but it was definitely drawing in the debris with it. And naturally, you need a gutter guard that's going to both keep the leaves and debris out and allow the water to go inside of it. So I will be really interested to see when we decide to open this one up, how much of that debris actually got drawn inside of it and how it's draining at that point. I'm back up on the ladder. It is Sunday, June 14th, 2020, and I wanted to show you where we stand with these locust flowers.